What an incredible day of learning it's been, and we still have one more presentation to go. Buckle up, everyone. We're spending the next 90 minutes with Brian Childs, training manager for Moz, to learn about SEO, keyword research, and what everyone gets wrong. Brian's going to teach us simple ways to scale research processes, tricks for implementing on-page SEO with your selected keywords, and some easy ways to optimize your website content. Prior to Moz, interestingly enough, Brian was vice president of a marketing agency and led corporate strategy at GE Aviation. And before working in marketing, Brian was the chief pilot for the United Nations in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Brian, I'm going to turn things over to you for the final session of our day. Let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Sounds like you've had a really full day, and hopefully we can end on an awesome note learning about search engine optimization. So I will sort of walk through a number of different things about search engine optimization. A lot of folks typically are starting out with I'll keep in mind that folks are probably starting out with sort of some basic knowledge, and then we can go into some topics in a little bit greater depth. Again, my name is Brian Childs. You can see my Twitter handle there on the screen at The Growth Pilot. If you want to follow that, or if you want to reach out to me, you can see training@moz.com. For those of you that don't know what Moz does, Moz is a search engine optimization, so SEO software platform. We got a bunch of different IP associated with that. And you can kind of think of Moz as being kind of one leg in a very robust stool of analytics platform. So if you're familiar with Google Search Console and Google Analytics, Moz is a tool that kind of goes along with both of those different tool sets. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's where I am right now. I am on the Moz Orbital platform right now, coming to you live. All right. So for today, when we're talking about search engine optimization, we're going to go over a number of different things associated with SEO, not just sort of like tips and tricks and hacks and stuff like that, but we're really going to be focusing on understanding search engine optimization and some of its component parts. So looking at this, we're going to say, what are some of the goals related to SEO? It's always a good place to start. What is it actually that the search engines are doing? What should you understand about the search engines? Like, how do they work? We're going to look at the search engine results pages, like what actually displays when you search for something, an evolution of what's actually causing those displays to occur the way they do. And then we're going to look at a couple of little best practices associated with keyword research. So think of it as like a building block approach as we go along. And hopefully you'll find this very valuable. And of course, we're going to have some Q&A opportunity at the end. If you do have questions, you can always write those down. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with this basic question. What are the goals of search engine optimization? I know this is, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about keyword research, but we really need to frame keyword research within the structure of how search engines work. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to look at what is it that we're actually doing when we do SEO, and then from there, we'll build on that. All right, this is the common way that people would look at goals, okay, is I want to drive traffic to my pages from organic channels. What does that mean? I'll give you the sort of layman's term of that. It's say, hey, I want more people coming to my site that have found me through search engines, right? That's search engine optimization. That's really what we're trying to focus on. And oftentimes this is framed up as saying, I want to rank better, right? That's usually the term that people would say, well, we want to rank better in search engines, right? And that's going to be the objective. And as our ranks go up, then, great, like we win, right? That's how we win. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I want to, and not complicated like hard to do, but just sort of maybe more nuanced is a better way of putting it, right? The first thing we need to start with is defining this term rank. Right? Like, what does it mean to rank well within a search result? This slide that I'm showing right now shows us organic click-through rates by search rank position. So what we're going to see here is we see the search rank position. So this would be the first thing that shows up in a search result, the second thing that shows up in a search result, the third thing that shows up in a search result, etc. Usually the first page of search results would be these first 10 results, and then you go on from there. And you can see that this is the estimated average click-through rate. Okay, so the click-through rate dramatically drops off when we get off of those first 2 or 3 search results. So when we think about driving traffic to our site, what we want to do is we want to be in those high click-through rate areas, right? So in the first rank, third rank, first, second, third, maybe even up to the fifth rank position here. You can kind of see this. This is what our target is. So when we think about doing keyword research, when we think about what really is our objective with driving traffic, we need to think about how can we get in these top rank positions, not just, oh, I rank 17, now I rank 15 later. That's great, right? We're going up by a lot. It's like, how do I get here into these result positions? Because that's where all the traffic is going to be coming from, okay? So maybe taking that original goal and putting it into a little bit more of sort of a measurable aspect, we could say SEO, really about generating traffic from search engines by ranking in the top 3 to 5 positions for targeted keywords, right? That's a little bit more measurable than just saying I want to rank higher, right? I want to actually rank in a particular place, right? But that's changed, okay? This has changed a lot recently, and this is really going to be sort of the theme of the topic that I'm going to be discussing today, is that it's changed a lot, right? It's more than just rank positions. And I show you this screenshot of a search engine result page to illustrate that, like what classes are needed to get a bachelor's degree in biology, right? Look at what's actually on this page. When I talk about rank positions, these are the actual organic rank positions down here at the bottom of the page, right? And imagine if we were on a mobile device, what this would look like. So the organic rank positions, even though we might rank high, ranking number 1 on this page, right? This study.com first result there, we're already at the bottom of the page. There's all this other stuff that shows up on pages. We need to consider that when we're looking at keywords and deciding on which keywords we want to target, right? Like, so what other stuff is there? Not just am I ranking high, right? Ranking high doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get the click. And if we get the click, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get visits to our site, etc. Okay. So this is a little bit more comprehensive view of goals. Yes, I want to rank for keywords that my customers use. Yes, I want to rank high for those. The high rank positions have high correlation with click-through rates. But I also want to actually win the click-through, right? I actually want to get somebody to visit my site from the result that shows up. It's not just enough to show up high and be like, call it done. Like, hey, we're done. We rank high. No, I actually need to get the click. People are going to assess those results. They may not click on the first one. They might click on the second one. So what do you need to consider when you're choosing words and how to optimize your pages to actually get that click through? Third, we want to make sure that we retain the visit. Nothing is worse than having somebody come to your site through the search engine, come to the page, look at what you have, and then go back to the search result, right? We'd call that pogo sticking, and pogo sticking is a pretty thing. It's something that we definitely want to avoid, right? So we want to retain that visit. We want to deliver someone value with our content. And then in an ideal case, we'd have somebody share those, share and promote that content, right? And so this might mean putting a link in their blog. It might mean tweeting about it or putting it on social media, but there's some kind of promotional activity to amplify what we've actually created and give a signal to the search engines that indeed what we've created is valuable, right? So this format, a little bit more comprehensive view on what goals for search engine optimization are. It's beyond just ranks, right? Indeed, develop valuable content, have it indexed by search engines. We'll talk about what that means. I want to get those clicks. I want to actually sort of entice people to click my result by having a very well-crafted title and meta description for my page. That's where that shows up in the search engine result page. I want to make sure that I retain the visit, that when people actually click on something from a search engine, they're not just visiting my site, spending 2 seconds and bouncing back and looking at something else, right? It's like I want to optimize that site, deliver people value, and actually give them something worth sticking around for that they can find easily. This is where like user experience design comes in, and what kinds of images do you use, and load speeds and all of those kinds of things. And then again, ideally get someone to share, right? Sharing, whether or not through a link or through social media, is an endorsement of the quality of your site. And the search engines ultimately are about identifying quality pages and showing those within the search results, right? So when we think about the first lesson here, right? So the first lesson is a very simple one, right? Is some of the things that people get wrong in higher ed is just optimizing for rank position, taking too narrow of a view on what it is that we're actually measuring, and not considering all the other aspects, right? So you might pay an agency or pay somebody or have somebody on your staff to go and change a bunch of titles and meta descriptions, but it's not a very comprehensive view. And so one of the things I would recommend is taking a much more comprehensive view. And what we're going to talk about for today is going to be some of the different things that enhance or that are more comprehensive than just purely those keywords and rank positions. Okay. And we will talk about that more, but I just want to kind of start there, right? So that's one of the main opportunities. Okay. So those are some of the goals. Those are some of the things that we can consider. Let's now dig a little bit deeper and ask ourselves, okay, fine. Like we want to rank higher on search engines, right? Like that's the goal. Okay, fine. We want to do higher. We want to have them, identify us as having valuable content. But then the question is, okay, well, how do they do that? How do search engines work? What is the goal of the search engine? So what we can do is we can optimize in a much more comprehensive way. So let's think about what do they actually do? And then we're going to dive into how those results are generated. So this might be for some might look at this and say, hey, this is, this is a little bit basic, but it's okay. It's okay. We want to start with the basics. We want to have a building block approach. All right. So Google is the dominant search engine, so I'll use them as a reference point. All right, there are, Yahoo has fairly significant market penetration in places like Japan. Bing has, 5-6%, maybe 10% in some places of market share for search, but Google's really sort of the dominant player in search, and so I'll use them as our primary examples for these. Okay, Google's stated goal, their mission is to organize information, right, and make it universally accessible and useful, right? That's their goal. So if everything associated with search engine optimization, certainly on the Google platform, and I believe most of the search engines could probably fall into this same sort of ethos, is to say that what we're really looking to do is we're looking to have information organized in some way so that it can be found by people, right? And that's, like, again, kind of a simple concept, but it's good to keep that as like when you're doing SEO, this is fundamentally what we're going after. Lights just went off. That just happens when I sit still on this table for a while. So if you notice the lights go off, it's great. Now I'm like front lit, so you can see me a little bit better. I think it's a perk. All right, so let's look at what is a search engine, right? Let's ask this a little bit more depth. So we've established that what are they doing? They're trying to find and deliver value, right? They want to go to certain pages. They want to find pages where value online lives, and they want to organize that information and display it to you within search, right? So very basic. Finding, what does that mean? The terminology there would be crawling and indexing. Delivering that would be ranking what they find. That would be really the search engine result page. Okay, so again, let's talk about some of these fundamentals. What is crawling and indexing? If we're going to be optimizing pages, if we're going to be developing sort of our search engine optimization strategy, if we're going to be looking for specific words that deliver us value, we want to understand this fundamental concept, crawling and indexing. What is it? All right, so I use this analogy for crawling of a subway map. Okay, you can think of it as a map. You can think of it as sort of, it doesn't have to be a subway map. It could be a road map. But conceptually, what crawling is, right? This is one of the main functions of search engines. What crawling is where a search engine starts at some known point, some website, right? And crawls through links on a page to all of the other pages it's connected to. So to use the map analogy, we'd say, like in this train map of the UK, that the train stations themselves are like the pages on the internet, and the blue lines are sort of the lines between stations would be links between pages. So the search engine, what it's going to do is it's going to start at some known website. Here it would start at a very established place, like on this map, it'd be London, right? Well-known location. And then crawl through pages, crawl through links to other pages and read those pages, right? It's not a browser, okay? So it's not Chrome. It's not sort of like loading a page. What it's doing is it's just looking at the data on the page, right? So it crawls, looks at the data on the page, records that, and then any links that it finds on those pages, it crawls through those links as well and goes to the next page, right? And so as it does that, it builds up its little network, or what we might call the index, right? So then what it does is it takes all those pages, all the data from all those pages, and it stores them in some easy to retrieve format, okay? and that would be the index, right? So we'd say if I am the search engine is crawling and indexing, what it generates when it does the crawl is it generates an index. And all that is a structured format of all the data that it's found, making it easy to retrieve, right? And so when we Google something and we see a result that says, I've found 7 million results in 0.02 seconds, right? Those 7 million results, that's coming from the index. It says, you put in a query, I have 7 million things that meet that criteria, and I've ranked them in some order based upon what I've found on the pages. So what happens is when it crawls pages, when it actually records that data, it then applies some sense of priority to the attributes that it finds. So here's an example, right? Here it's like a retirement community or students working with a retirement community to help the homeless, right? There's an article here. I was able to Google this, right? And pull this up within the search engines, which means it exists within the index. And then all of the information on this page is assigned some kind of value. So things like, hey, what's the page title? What are the images? What are the images about? What actually are the images? What are the links to the images? What are the links that are coming to the site and leaving the site? The heading tags and all of these different attributes, right? Those are all being recorded. And there's actually a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't necessarily show up on the page. Like there's going to be quality metrics that are applied, such as how easy is this to use? Is it readable? Is it written in a way that can be read? Is the font size sufficiently large that you might even be able to read it? Inbound links, authoritative metrics, relevance, et cetera. There's a whole myriad of different things. And Google would say that there's 200 different ranking signals that get applied to a page. And we would call that really the algorithm, right? That's really what the algorithm is. So looking at this, we'd say, all right, what do we know? We know that the goal here is to try to both rank higher and provide a good experience and show value with our pages, right? And to do that, we want to understand how the search engine works so we can identify not just on-page content issues, but also sort of more systematic issues. A good example of a systematic issue would be like, I don't have page titles, like I'm missing page titles on 50% of all of my pages, or I'm missing meta descriptions and page titles, or my images are too large, or the pages load really slow, things like that. Those can all impact your search engine optimization efforts. And even if you choose good words, and even if you choose and you create really valuable content, sometimes those systematic issues can really crop up. Okay, so it's not just a matter of like just picking words and putting them on a page. It's like there's a lot of different attributes that are looked at there. But things like page titles, meta descriptions, those are some of the primary ones. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a step even deeper than this, right? So we've talked about some of the goals. We've talked about sort of how search engines are reading pages through the process of crawling and indexing. And let's go ahead and look now at some of the specific search engine result pages themselves, right? So we talk about SERPs, okay? So SERPs, if you're not an SEO, not a digital marketer, I'm sure all of you are sort of familiar with this term, but I'll go over it anyway. Search engine result page, right? This is the actual thing that shows up when we do a search result, right? When I actually run a query, search engine result pages are those usually the first 10 results. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have here, all right? I think one of the fundamental things about SEO, and I'd argue that this is about digital marketing in general, is being very intellectually curious about what we see in search result pages, right? So if you're going to be an SEO or you're going to do SEO, one of the fundamental things you should be thinking about is just like be very curious about all this stuff. We see these results right here. Okay, I've done a search on avocados, right? A very sort of innocuous search, maybe potentially a little bit boring. Certainly nothing that has to do directly with higher ed, but it's a good example. And what I want you to do is I want you to stop looking at search result pages and just looking for what shows up, like what link am I going to click on, and look much more holistically at all of the different attributes on this page, right? This is a great example of a very interesting thing. For example, which of these comes first, right? It'll always usually populate with all first, but do you ever notice that the thing that's right next to all changes depending upon what you search for? Or do the pictures change if you change the search result slightly? Or is it always the same pictures of avocados, right? What is the first result versus the second result? What are all these little boxes that show up? Like, why are there some boxes over here, some boxes here? What causes those changes, right? So when you're doing search engine optimization, one of the fundamental things is just be very, very curious about this. Let's take an example of this. Okay, I've searched for avocados. I don't know, avocados, healthy thing, lots of nutrition facts. But let's just remove the S and see what happens. So I'll flip back and forth between these two images real quick. All right. So I remove the S. Now it's just avocado. Huh. Okay. Will that change anything? Why is avocado good for you? Do avocados do for your health? Those changed. And also avocado for Wikipedia, now up there, these switch results. Look at the images. Images change, right? The top stories change. Minor differences in keywords. Minor differences in the search query that you run can change the search results somewhat dramatically, okay? It's worth considering that. So I'm going to talk about how search results and the search algorithms are extremely smart, and we would probably all make the assumption that it's like, well, you add an S to something and, you know, Google's going to know that those are both the same thing. True, but the results themselves, even if it understands that they're the same, the results themselves might be slightly different. So you want to choose words that actually have and align with the best opportunity that you're seeking, right? So you really want to understand the words, the specific words that you're going after. Okay, for example, look at this. All of a sudden I add the word calories to it, totally different results page. I mean, sure, we got the nutrition facts. We still got this little avocado, you know, fruit up here. But then look at this. It's like now we bring all this calorie information. I clearly changed the result pretty significantly. And the people also asked box also pretty significantly different. Avocado toasts, right? Like, hey, I'm a hipster. I want to have some avocado toasts. What does it do? Boom, it's entirely gone. The nutrition facts, gone. All this calories, people also ask box, gone. It's replaced by recipes. All I do is put the word toasts next to it and it turns into recipes, right? And it's like, what do we have? Images, news, videos. Those are the kinds of things. Like, what about this? Avocado calories, news, shopping images. Wait a minute. I thought images was the thing that was left over here. You got to think, why do these things change? Where do the results come from? Okay, that's the main point, and kind of take a look at it in those terms. All of this could be boiled down to a term that I'd call search intent. So be intellectually curious about what the results are and consider how it impacts search intent. So let's look at a couple of different cases of search intent. What are the different types, right? There's basically, I'm in Seattle, so I'm, you know, contractually obligated to drink coffee. So there's three different types of search intent, all right? And so we're going to talk about those three different types of search intent and kind of take a look at what happens when we change those. This is extremely relevant to the keywords that you're going to choose in your keyword strategy. Knowing that you need to optimize pages, not just for content on the page, but also more holistically, and understanding search intent, very, very key to sort of the kinds of choices that you're going to make strategically. So let's take a look at these. Okay, kind of three primary flavors. Let's look at these flavors, all right? I'll go through each one. There is a flavor called informational search intent, okay? So this is number one, informational search intent. Let's take a look at what that actually looks at. Okay, here, corgis, right? Don't we all love corgis? I'm not a huge fan of corgis, but either way, they're pretty adorable. So I put in the word corgi breeds. What happens? I see 11 short facts. That's funny. Short facts about corgis. Pembroke Welsh corgi with a couple of pictures of corgis over here with their adorable little ears, right? A lot of information talks about it, and then some organic links over here. Well, interestingly enough, as I mentioned before, right, that the organic results themselves, these are the organic results. So if I rank number one, you know, dogtime.com, this is the first organic result. But then there's all these other things that we'd call search engine result page features, right? So that's kind of a Moz term, SERP features, but you can kind of think of it as like all the stuff that's not the organic results. So when I run a informational search, right, you're going to see certain types of SERP features show up, right? Things like information boxes, things like featured snippets, right? People also search for results, blah, 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 things like that. There's a lot of these different types of boxes. So not only am I looking at like, what are some of the little nuanced changes that happen, but the search intent itself displays different types of SERP features, and those SERP features are increasingly taking up more and more real estate on the page. In the case of our different types of search intent, informational searches take up or generate about 50 to 80% of all queries. Okay, so this is the number one type of query that people run when they're doing a search, is informational type searches, primarily this. That's really important when we start thinking about the buyer funnel, okay? Think about what types of informational searches people are running about higher ed and about the admissions process, okay? Okay, second type of search intent, transactional search intent. Okay, we talked about informational search intent, right? All about corgis, all about sort of information boxes, just general information, 50, 80%. Next, we're going to talk about transactional search intent. Okay, if I put in something that has transactional search intent, if I query for something that has transactional search intent, what do I see? I see shopping results. Interesting, right? Dorm room furniture. How come it's not this? How come it's not a box that's saying like, you know, dorm room furniture is this kind of stuff, and it has this kind of, you know, here's some things that you should know about dorm room furniture. No, the search result generates shopping results. It shows me, would you like to buy? Want to buy this stuff? I see a lot of ads, and we look at the SERP features here, right? All these things are going to be non-organic. Those are primarily shopping intent. And look what happens here. Look what happens up at the top here. All, and instead of it being images or news, what happens first? Shopping. This can kind of key you in a little bit about what type of intent you're tapping into. So if I am writing a article and I'm thinking of like, what kinds of words should I choose for this, or I'm developing my search engine optimization strategy, and I start coming up with words and I go and I Google those things, and shopping comes up as the primary thing that's next to all, and I see a lot of shopping types of results, maybe that's not necessarily an informational type of search. I might be finding myself moving into a shopping result. And so therefore I have to ask myself, am I trying to sell an online product? Or am I trying to get someone to come to my site and read an article, right? These are the kinds of little nuances that you want to pay attention to when you actually query things, okay? So that was our transactional search intent. The last one, the last flavor, right? Informational, transactional, and now navigational search intent is when I have some kind of desire to go visit a physical location, right? Or go someplace online, sort of, but primarily it's going to be like, I want to navigate to somewhere. So here, right, I'm in Seattle. I was talking about coffee. It's a bunch of coffee shops coming up, but like places to study near me. What shows up when I do a near me search? When I say something, something near me, it's going to show a map, right? And so this map result is its own type of SERP feature, right? It's saying, hey, you must, like, look at this, maps comes first, right? So you must be interested in going somewhere, or at least that's the first thing I'm going to show you is a map on how to get somewhere to kind of help you, because I assume maybe you're on a mobile device or something like that, right? And look at when we think about the impact this has on our potential click-through rate, right? Boom. Search engine result page feature takes up almost the whole screen, right? Almost the whole screen. And in particular, let's imagine that you're on a mobile device. I keep using this example of a mobile device. You really need to be thinking about the mobile experience, certainly as it comes to SEO. And let's take a look at this, right? This is, we're sort of entering into a new phase. Now, granted, we're looking at up until 2016, 2017, though it feels like it's almost over, not over yet. 2016 was the first year where mobile search outpaced desktop search, right? It was basically matched for the most part, or basically equal in 2015, but it really significantly outpaced desktop searches in 2016. So last year, this is a sort of a, this is why everybody talks about mobile, right? And if you're on a mobile device, imagine what this looks like, right? So let's go back to what I was talking about where I said, it's more about just rank positions, okay? Let's say that we're Yelp, okay? We're dominant Yelp. You know, you want to go someplace, you know, we got information about it. Even Yelp is at the bottom of this page on a desktop search. On a mobile device, Yelp probably won't even show up when I first pull up my phone screen, right? When I do the query and the search engine result page shows up, it might not even show up there. Okay. So it's like huge impact when it comes to mobile. And we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, right? Okay. So I mentioned 3 types of search intent, right? Those search intent are highly relevant to the types of keywords that you choose. They're highly relevant to sort of your keyword strategy and what you want to rank for, and you need to be really cognizant of those. But I also am going to provide a 4th type of search intent, which is sort of not usually when you're going to read literature, they talk about this, but I think it's very important to bring up, okay? And what is this random 4th type of search intent that I'm going to talk about? Branded search intent. And this is one, if there's one thing that a lot of teams get wrong, it's to not take into account the branded search intent and what that does to search results. Let's take a look at this example. Whenever I use examples for any particular industry, just keep in mind that I'm just using them as examples, right? I'm not poking fun at anybody. So, like just going to show it. But like, so here's an example. And this is nothing is wrong. Nothing is bad about what I'm showing here. I'm just showing you an example of what a branded search intent. When I use a business or a university's name in the search intent, look at what happens to the results themselves. Here I say Mills College admissions phone number. Okay. I don't say admissions office phone number. I don't say university admissions office phone number. I say Mills College. I use the brand name, and look at what happens to the search results, right? Mills.edu, 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 like all down the page, right? It's like the search engine is trying to deliver you value. And if you give it a brand name, you've just helped it tremendously to be like, oh, I know the answer to that one. Like imagine you're saying like, pick one card out of a deck of cards, and I want you to pick the Queen of Hearts. When you say Mills College, it's like saying, oh, I literally am asking for the Queen of Hearts, and all of a sudden I know which one to pick. It's no longer guessing anymore, right? So branded search intent, you should always expect, certainly with .edus, where it's like you have sort of a lot of authority and relevance in your industries, you should always expect that your brand and your website is going to show up high with those. So if you're tracking a bunch of keywords that are just like admissions office, Mills College admissions, Mills College undergraduate programs, Mills College graduate programs, Mills College financial aid resources, things like that. If you have that brand in all the keywords you're tracking, you're looking at your rank positions and sort of how your search visibility, we'll talk about what that means in a second, but how your rank positions are trending over time, you will see that they're quite high. And that can be a vanity metric. It could be like, oh, we're ranking so high for these words. It's like, try taking out your brand name and see what happens to your rank, the tracking of your rank positions over time. So I just want to point that out. Very, very common issue with people who are tracking SEO is they'll choose branded terms, and you're basically just giving your search engine and your analysis an assist. Okay, so another opportunity, right? We said more than just rank positions. We said look for more systematic issues. Think about how the search engine is actually reading your page, right? And then also look for the best variants of words, right? So if I was to summarize search intent, I'd say minor differences can have a big impact on words, right? So if you and I and your team are going to get together and sort of come up with words, and I'll be like, corgis, and you say corgi breeds, and you say, corgis wearing sweaters, and I go, corgis wearing glasses. It's like all of those minor differences, even though we're talking about sort of the same concept, this concept of corgis, even though we're talking about the same concept, all of those are going to have very minor differences. And what we want to watch out for is if we're trying to create content and trying to rank for things that are informative, right? Or things that are navigational, like how to get to whatever, that we keep that in mind and try to isolate that kind of intent for our content and for the words that we use, so that we don't end up like choosing to optimize for a word that has a totally different search intent, right? Okay. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Again, what we're doing is we're sort of digging into some of the component pieces of how to assess and look at choosing specific keywords. Okay, so we've talked about the search engines themselves. right? How do they do it? Crawling and indexing, looking for pages. We've talked about the search engine results pages, like what actually shows up. What are some of the kinds of things that show up and what changes when things show up? Now, let's talk a little bit about an evolution that's taken place, okay? How has this search engine evolved? And why am I going to talk about the evolution of search engines, right? Why does this matter? Why don't you just say, like, just tell me what it is now? The reason that I want to bring up this this change over time is because what's happened recently, and by recently I mean in the last 2 or 3 years, what's happened recently has been a profound and fundamental change in terms of the technology that we interact with on a day-to-day basis in search, in particular in search, okay? Many people, many content writers, many content teams will be looking at their search engine optimization strategy and thinking primarily about keywords. And the term keyword can sort of be interpreted as like individual words, right? Like, you know, again, like corgis wearing sweaters, or bachelor's degree admission program, or financial aid, right? Like individual words. But keywords themselves are more like, those are search queries, right? And so search queries can be 10 words long, they can be 3 words long, whatever, right? And so the thing to keep in mind is that when we think about keywords, right, and think about how the search engines work, we need to take into account this change. And let me describe it here. Google and the other dominant search engines are not looking to create a database where if I type in a keyword, they generate a result that has a lot of that keyword in it, right? That's just not how it works anymore. And I think the majority of people probably understand this. They realize that it's like you can't just go to the bottom of the page and type in a bunch of words, or like put a bunch of words on your pages, or like assume that a tagging infrastructure, right, on the bottom of the page, be like, this is what this page is about. The search engine has evolved recently to understand context. There's a lot of patent activity. If you really wanted to like nerd out and go and look at like patent activity associated with the algorithm, you could find sort of semantic similarity, the prevalence of words adjacent to other words, things like that. There's been a tremendous amount of technology development that's gone into this. But the main thing to think about is that the search engines understand, and in particular, Google understands context, okay? The context of the words that you use, the same way that you or I would organize information in our brains, that we would think, you could tell me 2 pieces of information, I should be able to fill in the third, just because I kind of understand the context you're talking about. The thing that really changed, so if you want to dig into this, and I highly, highly recommend at least taking a little bit of time to understand this concept, is the algorithm that we interact with today when we use Google is called Hummingbird. Okay, Hummingbird was rewritten right in 2014. It was the first major rewrite in several years. Behind what used to be Caffeine was the previous algorithm update, and then Hummingbird came out, and Hummingbird replaced Caffeine. Hummingbird understands the relationships between words, right? And I know that seems like, well, whatever, right? But imagine that you're reading data, ones and zeros, you're reading data, and you need to understand whether or not something is sarcasm, right? Or like, you know, in Seattle, we got the Seahawks NFL team. Imagine trying to understand the concept that it's like NFL teams have quarterbacks, they have players have pedigrees, they went to certain universities, and that's important for people, and they have stats, and they have coaches, and they had other teams that they worked for, that they played for, right? And that this team and this this NFL thing is an organization. It has this process for getting to some kind of win, and Super Bowls have, you know, it's like all of that information is contextually relevant when you search for things, right? And so the way that the search engine understands search intent is by using this contextual search algorithm and saying, like, I think I understand what you're talking about or what you're interested in, not just the words you're using. And we can see this, right? We can see this in really profound ways. We can see it when we use voice search. We can see it when we search for something on our mobile devices and like are sitting there on like a little screen and totally misspelling things, and the search engine still gets it right, right? It still gives us relevant information. It's because Hummingbird understands context. It understands the relationship between words. It's fascinating. I really strongly recommend digging into this. So let's look at some of the impacts of Hummingbird, right? Some of the impacts of Hummingbird and how this might influence maybe the way that you think about your keyword research process, right? And so now I'm talking about keyword research, you can kind of see I'm leading to like, it's not just keywords, right? You got to think about it in a different way, and I'll talk about that way. So some of the impacts of Hummingbird. Okay. This is a little chicken and egg, or maybe like hummingbird and egg, if you know, I don't know, maybe that works. So has the count of characters or the count of words in a query gotten longer because the search engine's smarter, it can give us better results? Or has the count of words gotten longer because that's what we've demanded and they've built a system to sort of satisfy that? Either way, chicken or egg, doesn't really matter. The reality is that queries have gotten a lot longer. If you were to go back, right, and I remember this, you go back 10 years and look at the way that people use search engines, the things that they would actually put into the search results would be very different, right? They'd be like, you know, kind of almost like not code language, but you wouldn't really be talking to it like you're a human, right? Like it's a human, I should say. You would just be like putting in a jumble of words and get some results and pick it out, because what you're trying to do, you're trying to like find a page that has all those words on it. Not anymore. People are starting to treat the search engine and query the search engine as if it was another human being, right? Because when you're talking to a human being, you can use natural language and it's going to understand that natural language and give you a response. Part of this is driven by artificial intelligence and machine learning. A lot of it comes from semantic search capabilities involved in Hummingbird. Nonetheless, search queries are getting longer. How are they getting longer? Well, they're getting longer in some very interesting ways. Predominantly, or one of the things that's really, really happening a lot, is people are asking questions to the search engines, right? This is this graph, this year over year graph, okay? If you were to look at the last couple of years, these numbers, these percentage gains would be very similar to this, right? You'd see how queries going up just crazy, crazy amounts, right? Who is, how to do, when is, or why should I, or those kinds of things. All that stuff that when you start asking a question in a search result that like auto populates underneath it, it's like people are asking questions to the search engines. They're not just plugging in little generalized words, they're asking questions. This is a big change, and those questions tend to be longer search queries, right? And another thing that's happened, and this is crazy, all right, I know we see this stuff every day, but it's like, hey, this is the reality of it, is it's like Hummingbird has been given the authority to answer questions, okay? So think of what that means, right? Look at this search and result page, okay? What is a good SAT score? 7,980,000 results found in less than a second, right? In the old days, it was like, just sort these and give me the right, give me like a sorting of like the right answers. But what we see now is we see Hummingbird being endowed with the ability to be like, I know the right answer. Not just that I know a bunch of stuff that's related to this and I can sort of rank it based upon what I deem to be relevant, but I think I have the right answer for this one correct answer. And that's this box. That's the box right here. It says the SAT score range, blah, 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 right? And you got to ask yourself, why is this the one that was shown? Why was this thing shown? This is called a featured snippet. Search engines, or I should say Hummingbird, is enabled to answer questions authoritatively when it thinks it has the right answer. That's a very different experience. Why? One, because it's incredible. It's crazy. Two, because this is now the top result. This is not necessarily the first rank position. The first rank position is here, right? And this operates above the first rank position. And then there's also these people also ask boxes, and people also ask boxes tend to correspond to where feature snippets show up, right? So that's the feature snippet. That's the people also ask box. Hummingbird is not only are people asking a lot more questions, but that Hummingbird has the power or the authority to answer them algorithmically. If it can find an answer on one of the pages it has in its index, it is being allowed to go generate feature snippets and display those in the results pages. What is a feature snippet? They have 3 different variants. I'm going to talk about feature snippets for a second here, because like this is a thing that y'all should be aware about, and you should be thinking about how this fits into your strategy, right? These rank above number 1. So if you're not ranking number 1, the question is, can we get into the feature snippet? Can I actually get above that stuff for these question type queries? Okay, so they come in 3 variants, right? There's short answers, like what we saw here. This is a short answer, right? This is an example of a short answer feature snippet, which is usually like 2 or 3 sentences. They come in a list, or they come in a table, right? Those are the kinds of 3 different variants, and you'll see those all over the place, right? They're not just from the first result, they come from the first page. So if you're on the first sort of 10 results, you can have a chance to sort of get into the featured snippet, right? They have a pretty significant impact on your click-through rate. It makes sense, right? Where these things show up, they take up a lot of real estate. And in fact, here's a little bit of data. Apologize for the blurry screenshot there, but if you look at mobile devices versus desktop devices, so desktop on the right, mobile devices on the left, you can see that there's a dramatic sort of lack of clicks that are taking place on mobile devices. Why is that? It's because these featured snippets and other stuff is showing up. People are looking for something, they get the answer on their phone, they're like, looks good, and then they go back and do another query, right? They're not actually clicking on anything because the search engine has already answered it for them. I want the movie times. What are the movie times? I want the game score. What's the game score? What's the weather like? There's the weather. I'm not clicking on those things. It just shows up right in the search result. Okay. And that is impacting your clicks. So pretty dramatic effects, right? And again, we see that it takes up a lot of real estate, takes up a lot of sort of the landscape, certainly on mobile devices, right? Where all these SERP features are showing up, takes up a lot of that, which can dramatically impact your click-through rates. So where feature snippets are highly prevalent, right? If you choose keywords that have a lot of feature snippet activity on them, you might get a decent rank position, right? But you might not actually get the click. So you could rank high, you could be like, oh, we're doing really well, we're ranking really high, but like I'm not actually seeing any traffic from those keywords, right? So it's like you might rank high, and if that's the objective, you might actually miss the fact that like you're ranking high for things that are blocked by keywords or blocked by feature snippets in large case, right? These things are not going away. This is not just a trend. Google's always sort of like tossing out new technology and trying stuff. These are not going away. Okay. This is a graph that shows sort of, as you can see here, kind of mid 2015 through mid 2016. And it's like basically sometime in the early part of 2016, they went from test mode with these things and really turned on the lights. And now this thing is like probably upwards, maybe more of like the 15 to 18% of search queries have feature snippets showing up in them. And again, question formats tend to be informational searches. Informational searches take up 50 to 80%. You got to ask yourself, how many keywords are we going after that are informational search? Probably quite a few, as people are considering sort of their experience and their future with going to college. This is another sample. I just wanted to show you sort of like I did my homework. You know, it's like I got 2 different data set samples. This shows that feature snippets are at a lower rate than the other one, but just kind of want to give you a sense that even 2 different sample sets show that feature snippets have gone up dramatically over the course of 2016 and 2017. So interesting thing. A lot of people will ask about like, what about voice search? Well, when you ask something to a Google Home or you ask something to Alexa, it's reading the featured snippet. And you can see this. You can ask a question to, if you have one of these personal assistants, you can ask them a question, or you can Google it and you'll probably see that the same results show up, right? Or if there's a feature snippet box, it'll be read. And when you ask, Alexa or Google Home something, and it says like, I don't know the answer to that, you're probably not going to find a feature snippet. Why? Well, because, or I should say, why are they using these? Why are these voice assistants using these? Well, because oftentimes you're asking them a question, which is what a feature snippet answers. It's usually a short answer, right? So you're kind of asking a short answer. It's an authoritative answer. So Google Home or Google or Alexa can be like, I know the answer to that. I feel confident with that. And these are algorithmically generated, right? It's not having to go pull from some database. It can just be like, it's already there on the page. I can read it. So if the query has a feature snippet, oftentimes that's what it's going to be reading. So if you're thinking about like, how do we get to a voice solution? Well, this might be one of the ways. So how do I get more feature snippets? That's always a big question, right? I'll kind of talk very quickly about this. It'll be something to think about if you want to try it out. I'm going to just kind of go over it at sort of like a high level, but you can think about how this might apply to some of your capabilities. You can use the heading tags. So if you're familiar with sort of H1s and H2s, you can use heading tags to structure information on your pages, right? So for example, in this case, here's our article about title tags, right? So title tags is like that's one of the elements that's on a page. This is our article about title tags. And we have these title tags. We say, okay, here's the H1. H1 says, what is a title tag? Okay, right? That's an element on the page is called the H1, like the heading tags, H1s, H2s, H3s. So we're using our H1 and say, what is a title tag? Okay, well, interesting. All right. And then why are title tags important? H2. And we have H3s, search engine result pages. These elements, so imagine again, the search engine is crawling your page, it's indexing the page, it indexes what it finds on the page. And what it's looking for is it's looking for answers, right? It's looking for like, what are little 2 and 3 sentence like correct answers I can find on a page? If you just got a block of text, maybe I can find something within that. But what if I were to help you by using the heading tags, which are structural elements on the page, and say, I'm going to ask a question on the page using a heading tag and then answer it immediately thereafter. Now, when the search engine reads that page, it's going to go dun, 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 read the H2 tag. Why are title tags important? Guess what's right here? A 2 to 3 sentence answer, right? So we can help the search engine. You can help the search engine when it's on your page to find information. And you may consider using your heading tags to ask questions, knowing that the search engine is going to be looking to answer those questions. And so when you're doing your keyword research, find questions that you can answer them immediately after the heading tags. It's kind of like structured data. It's like the cheap way of doing structured data, just using the heading tags on a page, right? And we see it here, right? So here's what is a title tag, right? I gave you this example here. What is a title tag? There's my like H designation or H2 designation for what is a title tag. Here, let's look at what is a title tag. What do we see? We see that a feature snippet is generated. We don't own that feature snippet yet, but we know that a feature snippet is being generated, which means the search engine wants to create one, right? It's looking for an answer for that. We see people also ask box, which is also highly correlated to the existence of feature snippets. And so we could say, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to take this title tag page, we're going to ask this question, and we're going to see if we can optimize for a better result than this, right? This is from 2010. We should do something more valuable than that. We rank high, we rank #1, but we don't rank in the feature snippet. So that becomes part of our strategy. Right. Here's another one. Why are title tags important? This was another one of the H2s that we had, which we answered with a featured snippet, sort of like 2 to 3 sentence answer right after that. We realize that we're ranking #2 and that there's no feature snippet developed currently. So what we can say is like, maybe at some point the search engine decides to answer this with a featured snippet. And so therefore we can get into that and be ready for it. So here's an example, right? Elmhurst College, scholarships and other awards, right? Like, how can we improve this page? Like, if you look at this, you could say, what are the H1s and H2s and H3? What are the elements on here that we might provide a little bit more value from, right? The H1, scholarships and other awards, which would be this, this text right here. H2, there is no H2. But we can see that the value proposition here is like, hey, get free money. So if we start going down the thought process of like, what does that put as a question, right? How do I get free money for college? How can I get money, or like, how can I get money for college? Like, do all the different permutations of that question and come up with things that are relevant. Like, how can I pay for college without my parents' help? How do you pay for college all by yourself? Those are the same search intent, right? The same concept as how do I get it for free? Right? Conceptually, they're the same sort of thing. And you can see these generate featured snippets. You can look at these feature snippets and be like, well, they're in a list. So maybe what I can do is I can answer this on a page like that and provide resources. And what immediately follows that H2 tag is like a bulleted list that gives me sort of, 7 ways to pay for college or something like that. Or, you create a new page and go after something like that. But they just want to give you a concept to say that, like, when you see a bunch of your pages that don't have any kind of H2s and H3s, think of it like, well, how am I going to help the search engine answer questions about this topic that I'm writing about on the page? So something to consider. Questions are really a cool thing to do. So long story short, for this section here, optimize for those SERP features. In particular, think about your questions. Like, are you answering questions? Are you answering informational search intent? right? Are you answering questions and are you putting those questions on the page in such a way that the search engine can easily find them? And are you putting the answer immediately after the question in a very succinct way? Not like, hey, how do I pay for tuition? And then let me tell you a story about paying for tuition. No, like, how do you pay for tuition? Here's a bulleted list, right? List. And then after that, I give a much more greater in depth, right? So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Look into feature snippets. It's very interesting. Okay. So last but not least, let's talk about the next thing that we can think about, right? We talked about how do search engines sort of work? How do they see the world? You know, what are these search engine result pages? What do those things look like? You know, how are those results getting generated? What's the algorithm that's running all of that? And now let's go in and say, let's say I want to create content. It's like, okay, I'm sold, search engine optimization, fine. Like, now what do I do? Like, what do I got to do? So what I'm going to talk about now is I'm going to talk about sort of how we take these concepts and apply them to some of our research processes, right? So I'm going to give you two frameworks to think about, and think of these as almost like a matrix, right? Like X, Y axis, they go together. I'll describe each one of them and then I'll talk about putting them together. Okay, two different concepts, but we can do them together. So if I was to say, like, if I was to come to you and we're going to come up with keywords, I would say we should start here, right? I'm going to show you how you can organize this, but let's talk about what these two different things are. One is the buyer funnel phases, and the second is contextual keyword topic groups, right? You can get a sense of when I talk about contextual keyword topic groups, I'm talking about Hummingbird. And when I'm talking about buyer funnel phases, I'm talking a little bit about search intent, okay? So we can apply both of those things to our keyword research process. Okay, let's talk about buyer funnel phases. There's a lot of different names for buyer funnel phases, right? So there's HubSpot has their version. mStoner has a really good version as well, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. But buyer funnel phases, let's talk about what those are. First thing, okay, this is this is like kind of another like no duh sort of thing, but like 89% of consumers start their purchase process using a search engine. 89%. I mean, you could probably say those 11% are the people that don't have computers, right? Everybody starts with a search engine. They go to the search engine, they start asking it questions as they try to sort of articulate their problem and articulate what they're trying to accomplish. So this is a really big deal, because what you want to do is you want to be the last thing that they touch before they make their purchase, right? But the journey that they go down to get to you tends to be a very long one, right? So let's look at this. The buyer funnel, right? You want to take into account when you're creating content, you want to take into account where people are in this funnel, where people are, what they're searching for in different phases of this funnel. And we usually break this into like top, middle, and bottom of the funnel, right? So top of funnel content would be like, I don't know what my problem is, right? I don't really know how to define my problem, but what I do know is I have a problem, right? So maybe the problem statement with higher ed is like, I know that I want to go back to school. I've always wanted to go back to school, or I know that I'm getting out of the military soon and I want to think about, going to college, or I'm graduating from high school and I need to think about going and getting an education, or I want to think of my different education options, right? I don't know what the solution is. I don't know whether I want to go into a vocational degree. I don't know whether or not I want to be a doctor, but I know that I need to do this. Middle of the funnel is more like, you know what, I have some semblance of my different options, right? And those different options are this school versus this community college, those kinds of things, right? And I'm making comparisons and I'm looking at the different options, and I have different criteria that I'm going to measure those against. And then the final thing is when I actually get down closer to my purchase, which is, this is the bottom of the funnel. This is where I'm really getting into the nuts and bolts of like, let me compare specific attributes that are important to me so I can make that decision, right? Like, where's my calculator? Where's my like pricing calculator? What financial aid specifically am I going to get? What options are perfect for me, right? And I use very different language and very different keywords querying things in the top of funnel. This is where I'm talking about things where I'm like, I don't know the technical term for this, right? I don't know what, some of the terminology that would be on an application. Maybe I don't even know what a transcript is. I mean, it's possible, right? Like, what is a transcript? These are those top of funnel things. If you're at the bottom of the funnel, you know the terminology. It's very technical. You're probably using a lot of branded terminology, right? This is the mStoner higher ed experience map, and it maps very well to these different funnel stages, right? Top, middle, bottom. It's a really great format. I think it speaks very well to your industry, right? So it takes some of these concepts and applies them over to your industry and gives you a little bit of a framework. So hats off to mStoner for putting this together. And I definitely say, check it out. So the thing is, like, you know, when here's an example of sort of the classic issues. It's like, hey, what if we optimized a page for like, and I went to University of Maryland, so I can sort of make fun of University of Maryland. I'm not making fun of them, but like use them as an example. University of Maryland undergrad admissions start application. Let's pretend that I want to go to this page, right? This is the bottom of the funnel. This is where I want people to convert, right? And I try to optimize my page for this because I'm like, that's what this is about, right? This is what it's about. It's all about this, or this is the only piece of content I have. Well, guess what? We have a branded term in there, so that automatically is going to, you know, probably make it so that these results are only going to show University of Maryland. It's not going to be a very competitive keyword that I'm going after. Undergraduate admissions, right? Like somebody who doesn't know what they want to do might not put in undergraduate admissions. It's kind of a little bit of a technical term, right? And then start application. That means that like I already know that I want to do this. So this is an example of a keyword, right, that you might track that's like, well, you know, is this going to tell us a lot about how well we're doing, right? Whereas things where it's like top of funnel along the same search intent path, along the same buyer funnel would be like, where do I order transcript? Where do I take the SAT? You know, what classes do I need to get into college? Those are the kinds of things that are way at the top of the funnel of the person that would be looking for this kind of information. And what we can do is we can use search engine optimization to bring them there. Why do I talk about this funnel? Right? Because SEO really plays more of a role in the top of funnel and certainly in the middle of funnel, right? So when you're thinking about things to optimize for search engine optimization, consider that you get a lot more bang for the buck when you're thinking about things at the top of the funnel. These kinds of question format types of things where you can generate a visit to your page and generate some kind of relationship with that visitor. Okay. Next, right? So that's the buyer funnel. That's one type of attribute. And the last thing I want to talk about here is contextual topics, right? So contextual topics relates to the way that Hummingbird sees the world. And I'm going to tell you a story about this. So just kind of follow along with me as we talk about contextual topics, right? So not only do you want to take into account where the person is in their buyer funnel, what types of words am I going to optimize my pages for to make sure that I'm targeting specifically that that search intent associated with where they're in the funnel, but I also want to take into account how to organize around these topics. So let me just kind of like, just follow along with me for a moment, okay? So we're going to talk about, imagine that all of the keywords that are related to your industry fall within this blue circle. Okay, everything, right? It's not talking about shoes. It's not talking about corgis. They're just keywords that are related to higher ed, maybe the admissions process, right? And inside of that big circle is going to be a bunch of topic areas, right? So it's like things that are related to the admissions process or things that are related to higher ed. Okay. And in this case, let's use the college admissions example, right? And this is just like a sample of different topics, but you could say there's going to be queries that are about how do I finance this thing? There's going to be queries about like, what do I need for my application? What should I expect from the alumni? What kind of amenities are there going to be, you know, that I can make comparisons between? And what are some of the career options that come out of it? Just an example, right? An example. These are the kinds of things that Hummingbird would say, you know what? There are thousands of different variants of asking this. Maybe you're talking into your phone, you know, maybe you just took a bite of a sandwich and I kind of can't understand what you're talking about, but like, I can hear you when you're talking into your phone or you're talking to Google Home and it's saying like, hey, this sounds like it's more of like a financing type of question associated with college, right? Thousands of different queries that are associated with each one of these, but Hummingbird probably will organize them and be like, this is probably about financing, It's kind of that topic, right? And you probably do well in some of these, and your competitors probably do well in some others. But if you're just tracking things on a keyword by keyword basis, it's going to be very hard to decipher where you do well and where you don't do well, right? So what you want to do, and this is where we get into a little bit more of the applied stuff, like the monitoring of search engine optimization. What we want to do is we want to get into a little bit of the like, I want to track these groups. I want to think about tracking groups of keywords that are related to how Hummingbird might view things as being contextually similar. Okay. So search visibility. What does that mean? What is search? Did I talk about search visibility? I don't think I did. Let's talk about search visibility. Search visibility, you maybe remember this graph, right? This is the estimated click-through rate by search rank position. When we think of search visibility, this is the estimated average click-through rate across a group of words, right? So let's say that we're tracking a bunch of words, right? And we want to be in, say, ideally we're in sort of like the top 3 results. But if I have like 100 words or 500 words or 10,000 words that I'm tracking, maybe some of them I rank number 1 for, right? So I'd be like, okay, search visibility would be 35%, solid. But then I also maybe rank, in the second rank position for some of them. Okay, well, so that means it's an average somewhere between 35 and maybe 12%. Like there'd be an average in there based upon how I stack up. And then there's others that maybe I rank really low. So you'd say in this case, right, my search visibility would be the average of all the keywords I'm tracking in a group. And that would be somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, 8%, just in this example, right? It's like I'll have some things I rank high for, some things I rank low for. And on average, right, my search visibility would be across that whole group. So you likely rank well for some topics and not others. So I might rank well for a bunch of keywords in topic A, and I might rank not so great in topic B, right? So I could say that my search visibility for the group of keywords in topic A is quite high, and the search visibility for the group in topic B is quite low. So maybe I do really well with financing, but I don't do really well with, career options. So what does this have to do with sort of keyword research? Well, it has to do with tracking your performance over time, right? You pick keywords, you optimize for those keywords, but you can't just leave it, right? You want to do research, you want to choose keywords, and then you want to optimize pages and say, did that actually have an impact? And more importantly, where do we do really well, right? And where do we not do well? And how can we make sure that like our competition doesn't start moving into places where we do well? Or maybe we should strategically go for places where we don't do really well and start like, hammering away at some of our competition there. So let's look at this. Let's say, hypothetically, this is how it shakes out, okay? Let's say that you rank well for words like let me put this in different terms. Hummingbird thinks you're very authoritative and therefore ranks you very high because you have relevant information in things like financing and application types of keywords for higher ed versus you don't do as well for career options. Your competitors, those guys, they do well over there. So what we'd see in tools for search engine optimization, we'd say that you have decent search visibility, right? Our average rank is quite high for financing and application types of terms, right? We have high search visibility for those. And we have comparatively low search visibility for things like career options, amenities, and alumni, right? And so what I'd want to be watching out for is this. I want to make sure that like, as I'm tracking along and as I'm doing my search engine optimization and as I'm finding words and creating content and chugging along with my strategy, that this doesn't happen. Where all of a sudden, the competitors, they start writing content about something that I'm doing and I start seeing a degradation. Now watch what happens here when this takes place, right? I start losing my rank positions for specific keywords and over time, my average search visibility would go down. And if that competitor continues to rank high, they generate more links going to their content, et cetera, I would expect that they would start ranking higher for specific keywords and my search visibility would continue to degrade, right? Such that at some point, they may become sort of the dominant known site for that topic area, right? So the thing I'm getting at here is that when you think about keywords and you think about creating content, what you're wanting to do is you're not just wanting to just focus on like tracking individual keywords or coming up with like the one keyword that you're going to rank for. What you want to think of is I want to create content that provides the most value, right, on a particular topic area or a set of content, right? A group of content that provides the most value and be very considerate of the types of keywords I rank for, because I want to rank those, relatively few assets as high as possible. And I want to be known for that in terms of the way that Hummingbird would look at my authoritativeness on that topic, right? And then I want to monitor my competitive positions associated with those, right? So this would be sort of my last advice, is to say, organize research into relevant topic groups, both on the buyer funnel as well as on topic groups that are relevant for Hummingbird. Okay, so let's turn that into a little bit of operational knowledge, and then we'll sort of wrap up. Okay, so where do I start? How do I do, like, you just told me buyer funnel and like contextual topic groups, cool. Like, now what do I do? Like, that sounds great, but like, you know, now what? And maybe maybe you give me the words and then I go and optimize my H1s and H2s and try to get into those feature snippets, but I'm still missing the words. Like, what do I do? Okay, so let's take these two things and put them together. This is a great exercise to do if you don't do this already. Okay, go to your whiteboard, draw 2 lines, right? 2 lines, just like this. Okay, so we're making basically 3 columns. Okay, 3 columns, put in those 2 lines there. And along the top, okay, along the top of this, put in top, middle, and bottom. Or you can use the mStoner framework and use those relevant terms as well, right? And just say like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to come up with words, but when we come up with words, let's make sure that we put them in the right column. Okay, don't just like toss words against the wall. Like, conceptualize them as being like, which phase are these? Are these question format things that are at the top of the funnel, informational searches? Or are they in the middle of the funnel, kind of comparative stuff? Or is it in the bottom of the funnel where it's like definitely branded versions of this? Draw a couple lines, right? Draw some lines across the page, right? And make little groupings there. And then put your contextual topics on this side. And so maybe those contextual topics are like, something that's relevant to your most valuable programs that you have, or the kinds of things that you want to be known for, or at least do some research around like, how does Hummingbird actually maybe look at this? Like, look at the people also ask boxes and look at the autocorrect suggestions for things that you're typing in, being like, Hummingbird is trying to tell me something. It's trying to tell me that these things are related to one another. So put your topics here. Now fill out words, right? With your group, with your team, put words up here, but put them into these boxes. Consider like, where within these boxes actually are this given word. It isn't enough to just be like, let's just make a list and decide on which one we like most. Say like, where do we have decent coverage and where are we not? Where do we literally have gaps where none of us have come up with words for this topic in the middle of the funnel, right? It's good to know. Once you have a bunch of words and some ideas for those, go use a keyword research tool, Keyword Explorer. Moz has one. It's really great. You can get use of it on free trial. Google Keyword Planner is another one, great ones. Come up with at least 500 variants of the words that you have, or at least 500 variants of sort of the words in each one of these groups, right? So like, why do I say 500? Because if you try to look for 500 variants of a given word, you are going to come up with a huge number of alternative options. You might be the only person that has ever gone and looked at the number of variants, because remember, avocados, avocado toast, avocado, all of those different variants of the same words, and find the ones that are the best. Find the ones that have the most volume, the lowest competitive scores, the highest opportunity to get into feature snippets and things like that. Like, think very broadly about it and realize that Hummingbird has that broad context. It's like, I know that all these words are similar to one another, so you should act that way too and try to find all those variants, right? You can use tools like Moz. Like I said, Keyword Explorer would be the tool that would help with this. We even have a drop down in Keyword Explorer. When you look at suggestions, it'll give you a number of different variants of question formats around a particular word, right? So like, how do I make avocado toast? Why are corgis so short? Relevant things like that to higher ed. All right, so you can use Moz tools. And another thing I wanted to point out is the campaigns tools, right? So not only in the research process, research is one half of this, but execution and monitoring is another. So let's say that like, we get those 500 variants, we put them into our tracking tools, and we want to see sort of like how we do. And I mentioned the search visibility, like how can I actually measure against my competition? Well, we can do that within Moz Pro. I'll show you that really briefly here with a couple screenshots, and then we'll sort of wrap up and we can take some questions. Here I'm looking at a graph that shows me the search visibility over time. So each one of these dots represents a weekly update to our search visibility, okay? And I'm looking at this against the competitors. My business would be represented as the blue line, and I have my competitors here represented as these other lines, okay? I have my search visibility figure here, right? So search visibility, 11.68%. That means I probably rank high for some words and maybe I rank low for others, but on average, I'm basically ranking around like 11 or 12%. A high search visibility number would be about 35%. A low would obviously be 0, right? And what I can do is when I put things into my tool, whether or not it's Moz or other tools, label them in some way, use some kind of tagging mechanism so you can isolate groups of words, right? So those different variants of the words that you're going to be tracking, the contextual keyword topic groups by buyer funnel position, label them, isolate them, right? And then track against your competition. If I removed this label here, right, what I'd see that all of the competitors are basically kind of, low search visibility along here. But as soon as I put this label on it and track just keywords in a specific group, I can see I'm really only competing with one competitor, and I can kind of see how I track against them. Okay. So those are the kinds of things you can do with search engine optimization tools. This is really like what the role of those plays, not just the research process, but tying your research process to the monitoring that you're going to do to see whether or not what you have done has an effect. Okay, quick recap, and then we can go to Q&A. Think very broadly about your research process. Consider and be intellectually curious about what shows up in search engine result pages. Consider very much the way that the search engine identifies information on the page, right? So keep in mind that's like you have the ability to structure information on the page. You can use heading tags. You can use structured data to assist the search engine to find value on the page. And definitely think about those. Those might seem like they're technical issues, but it's really not. Content teams can absolutely handle those kinds of things with just a little bit of training. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. I know it's probably been a really awesome experience for you guys to spend all this time in these different classes. Moz offers training classes. You can see that there, moz.com/training. And I believe mStoner is going to provide a discount code that you guys can use. In fact, if you go to the bootcamp series, you can use just mStoner and they'll get you 20% off. And if you are a nonprofit, as many of you are, there's a link there that you can also get access to, and that'll provide a discount for the Moz Pro toolset. And always feel free, reach out to me on Twitter or shoot me an email.
Let's dive into some questions. And folks, of course, you're welcome to ask more in the chat room while we're fielding the first few ones. So Robin read my mind, actually. One of the things I was also thinking about, and so was Robin, is how much does browser history or your cookies or other artifacts kind of impact the search return results that you might see versus somebody else?
Yeah, so tremendously kind of for certain searches, okay? And I'm certainly not the expert on sort of like how the browser history is going to impact that. The short answer is it does. So your preferences, imagine that the search engine, again, if we think like the basic concept is that the search engine is trying to provide value to the person who's running the query. If it understands your history, then it also gets a sense of like what's important to you. One of the most interesting or obvious ways that this happens, I find, is in local search intent. So navigational search intent. Go to a map, and on that map, you're probably going to see pins dropped in places that you have either recently visited or recently searched for. Alongside Hummingbird is sort of like the dominant algorithm. There's another update that happened in 2016 called Possum, and Possum was an update that included relevance in local search results, so map results, that is like based upon where you're located. So I would say that like if you want to see the most obvious version of how search intent is tailored based upon your previous queries, you can do that when you search for, coffee shops near me, or go to anything that generates a map result and actually click on the map itself and go look at the map, and you will see within that the other places that you've gone to. So the search engine absolutely is trying to use information that it has from your browser history to say like, I think this is relevant, but it's going to be highly dependent upon industry. It's going to be highly dependent upon certain types of queries. So it's not what things tend to happen in one industry and then permeate out into others. So you might see it for certain search queries about like things that are, your personal searches, but they might not have the same results as what you see them in things that you might consider to be like your target keywords, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to change over time. Hope that helps.
Okay, I think it does. Thank you. So You were talking about the topic areas, right? And so Erica is wondering if you suggest that colleges and universities have a topic area for each area of study or for each major at the institution.
So I think that that certainly is a relevant. So let's think about like let's think about the search engine trying to segment out different types of intent, right? At some point, I am going to decide on a course of study, right? Or maybe like I'm looking for a more advanced degree in a course of study that I have. It kind of makes sense, and oftentimes what businesses will do, no matter if it's higher ed or industrial manufacturing, they'll usually look at their product lines as being sort of the easy contextual topic groups that they segment out. The question that I would have is to say, is there a significant difference in the way that like that person who's searching for those, is there an identifiable difference in the way that they might search, right? So I would always say, yeah, there's definitely going to be differences between the person who's like um, maybe going for like a technical degree versus more of like a liberal arts degree, or somebody who's going to be doing like a, night classes, adult education kind of thing. There might be some differences there in search intent, but I would ask, are there significant differences between the type of people? And I looked at an example from some of the like higher ed would be like, maybe there's two different people that are both going for a biology degree, but one of them is like a returning, person who has, didn't complete their college and they're returning to college. Another person is getting out of the military, and another person is sort of getting out of high school. I would argue that the search intent, the kinds of questions and queries and the things that are going to matter to those people are going to be somewhat different, more so than necessarily at some point they're all going to be going for the same biology degree. They might be sitting in the same class. So just be cautious of thinking of breaking things into your product groups, what I would consider to be like a product group designation, versus like, is the person who's doing the query different? Because the search engine's trying to optimize for the person in their search intent, not necessarily like align things with how you might structure your information on the site.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Amber has asked a great question. She wants to know how we track and measure success with SEO, and other than traffic, is there a way that we can quantify how often, say we're showing up in this on the search engine result pages or in those feature spaces?
Yeah. So there's a number of different metrics you could look at. I'd say that like when I think about setting up sort of performance metrics for search engine optimization or digital marketing generally, I would say that the first thing I want to look at is some kind of goal completion metric and work back from there. So the challenge is that people enter into search engine optimization and start from that rank side, where they'll be like, whoa, how do we rank and how do we get traffic? And they kind of go down the funnel towards their value, like something that's valuable for your business. So let's say that like for higher ed, the goal would be, applications or signing up for campus tours or something like that, right? I would say, do I have a decent sense of how many clicks on that tour or sign up for a tour or completions of the tour, whatever registration form do I get from organic channels, like in Google Analytics, right? Like how many of those do I get? If I'm going to do optimization, I want to make sure that I have some baseline to say like, hey, in the past 6 months or 12 months, here's how many of those we've gotten from search engine optimization, because that is going to feed back to everything else you do, because that is ultimately the number you want to move. I could get higher ranks, I could get higher traffic, but if that number doesn't move, it's just like I'm going to have a hard time justifying that the dollars are there. And it's entirely possible that you can put an equal measure, effort into paid channels and organic and realize it just for some words, certainly for bottom of the funnel words that are highly competitive, that show a lot of what I'd call like purchase intent or intent to complete the action. It's going to be very challenging, and maybe paid is the better thing to do. But you could measure and say like, hey, are we getting higher rank positions and more traffic from those top of funnel words? And does that seem to correlate to more conversions on the thing that's delivering us, business value? So goal completions is number one. And then I'd say you just back out from there and get to traffic, and then you could go to rank positions. But if you don't, if you don't have sort of that cascade of information, you could be like, well, we're not ranking high. Let's see if we can adjust that. Well, we rank high, but our traffic isn't coming. So that must be a click-through rate issue, right? So maybe we adjust our titles and meta descriptions, or, where page load speeds are not great. And we get a lot of traffic, but we don't get a lot of conversions. So clearly we're not like, maybe the button's not in the right spot, or we got to think about the messaging we have on the button, or maybe the form's too long, or, whatever. You can kind of diagnose where the issues happen there.
Okay, and a technical question from one of our university teams.
Uh-oh.
As you've been talking about, yeah.
I gotta go later.
Yeah, right. Oh, and look at the time. No.
And I'm out.
Yeah. No, it's not that technical, I guess. But you've been talking a lot. I think you've really convinced us all that these feature snippets, we got to pay attention to it, and especially with the rise of voice queries and people are asking more questions, right? So should we be putting our keywords in question format in the back end of our content management system when we're typing things in, like, or do you have any advice or guidance on that at all?
Yeah, so I guess sort of the back end can be a little bit that can mean a lot of different things to different people. I would say that, like, there's a couple things that can be interesting, and I'll try to describe. Some of this is not easily described without sort of looking at an image of it, right? But like a couple things you can do. One, you can use those existing H tags, so H1s, H2s, H3s. You can use those as structural elements. Again, realize that, like, the search engine looks at those as hierarchical pieces of information. So you can put the questions in those heading tags, and usually within a content management system, you can designate that, in whether or not it's WordPress or whatever. You can say, like, this is a heading tag, this is a heading 2, heading 3, and put those questions and answer them immediately thereafter. You can use something that's a little bit more specific type of structured data, like actually going in and looking at, maybe there's a markup. You could look at schema.org or look at markup generators in that to actually put them on the page, and make sure those things show up in some identifiable way. And you may even just, you might not even need the H tags. You just want to, like, ask questions and answer them and show the succinct answer very close to the question that's being asked. Something else that's been kind of interesting that people will do is on-site search. On-site search means, like, if you have a search window, you should have some ability to go in and find out what people are actually searching for when they use the little icon of search. And so you might be able to find the questions that people are specifically asking and the pages that they click on maybe after they ask that question. You could be like, well, that was the page that showed up, or that was the page that people clicked on when they asked that question. We get a lot of stuff about financial aid, so let me just put those questions on those pages. And then the last thing, you could go into Google Analytics. They don't give a lot of information about keywords. A lot of that stuff is not set, but you can go in and look at some of the keywords that come through. And I usually will search by the word or the letter W, because that'll usually give me the, like, what, who, when, and there might not be a lot of results for that, but you sometimes can find those within some of the organic queries.
Awesome. Great tips. And can you just confirm or talk a little bit about using keywords within the written body copy? You talked a lot about those headers, but what about the body copy itself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So imagine, let's pretend that, like, we do this research and we say, I want to write about sort of a top of funnel topic about, like, helping people understand what they need to do to get prepared to go to school, whether or not that's like a list of things that they need to do, or a checklist, or a calculator, or whatever it is. And I have a bunch of body copy on the page I can do there. And I want to target, like, checklist for college or whatever, right? And amongst us, there's a bunch of different ways of asking that. One of the things you can do is what Moz will call, like, related topics. Okay, so related topics would be like alternative variants of that same word. So when I'm doing research, like avocado and avocados and avocado toast, like that example, it's like I have a bunch of different words that are all clearly about this same, food. And what I could do is I could say, like, all right, I have a bunch of different words, and I want to make sure that I'm using those different variants on the page. So when you're writing your copy, sometimes people will like decide that what they're going to do is they're going to go back and, like, update existing copy, or that I'm going to write an article and then populate it with words. I strongly recommend writing and keeping in mind the list of words that you're going to go after. So say, like, I want to have this like, going to college checklist. And I realize that in the going to college checklist topic area, there's going to be a bunch of different sort of variants of that word. Maybe it's checklist, or maybe it's list, or maybe it's itemized list, and make sure that those words show up within the body copy, because all that does is reinforce for the search engine for Hummingbird that it has a high degree of confidence that it's looking at a page that's about this subject. If all you're doing is putting it like in the title, it's like, well, is it about this or isn't it about it? So you absolutely want to have the body content have related topics in there. You just don't want to have the same word over and over and over again, or else it'll just feel like it's very keyword stuffed.
Right for humans, right?
Right for humans. Yes.
Yeah.
Right for humans. Yeah.
I love it. Brian, I can't think of a better way to have ended today's conference. Thank you again for your time.